Hello, I'm Bret and you're watching The Defining Moment for Creating the Culture of Conscience. Our guest today is Dr. Meredith Young-Sowers. Dr. Sowers is a spiritual teacher, a speaker, and author of several books, including her latest, Spirit Heals, Awakening a Woman's Inner Knowing for Self-Healing. She has a doctorate of divinity from the Universal Brotherhood University, and she's also the co-founder and executive director of the Stillpoint Foundation and School in Walpole, New Hampshire. Meredith is a devoted wife, mother, and grandmother. Meredith Young-Sowers, welcome back to The Defining Moment. It's really a pleasure for me to welcome you back here on our program.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you again.
Thanks for coming. Our topic today is the mind-body factor in healing diseases. And I'd like to begin by asking you to share a defining moment from your own life.
I was sitting in bed and I was bemoaning the fact that I felt so unable to discover the next part of my life. That absolute desert place where I've tried everything, I have done everything, I've, to try to bring a new delight and a new energy. I'd also come through a very difficult divorce. I think those are probably the only kind of divorces there are, even if it's amicable. And I had a couple children, and I was happily remarried, but it was this, you're trying to get yourself situated in your life to go the next level. And so it was raining outside, and I was sitting in bed, and I was really desperate. I was just in that place of not just, oh, please, God, show me the way, but with that absolute heartfelt place where we know we have hit bottom. We are at that place of surrendering, of really surrendering. And I remember saying to myself, it's not about, oh, well, move me in a new direction, but don't touch my children, or don't touch my beloved Stillpoint. And I found myself really offering it all up and saying, show me the next level of my work, no matter what. Give me the understanding of how to take a step in this direction, period. And so a book fell off behind me, really fell off the bookcase behind me into my lap. And it was a book that had a picture on the cover of this very strange-looking Indian guru, that Satya Sai Baba, and he has a big afro hairdo and this simple orange robe and this picture, and here he is in this book. And I picked up the book and I started to leaf through it, and they were stories of this gurus and spiritual teachers healing of various people. And so I'm reading these pages and I'm thinking, well, maybe this isn't an accident. I mean, what an intuitive concept. Maybe this isn't an accident. And of course I knew that there was something more to this. And I was hoping that as I read these stories, I felt more and more confident that maybe this was a doorway. Maybe this was another way to help find myself. And so just in pleading my case to God, and the phone rang. Well, now, what a pedestrian thing, right? You're in the middle of this heartfelt surrender to God, this great epiphany, and the phone rings. And so I thought, oh, well, I'm not going to pick it up. And then I thought, well, maybe the kids are in trouble. So I patted across the floor and I picked up the telephone. And my mother, who lives in the next town over and is not given to spiritual conversation, said, I was just sitting here, and I heard loud and clear that I was to call you and say, God knows. God knows. Does that mean anything to you? Well, the idea that you're talking to divinity and that in that split second there's a response, it's like, no, wait, we tend to think God needs time. That God sort of, in our own minds, out there, and we have to go through the steps, and then the steps come back toward us. But the idea that there is that instantaneous knowing and responding to that power of real heartfelt intentionality. And I put down the phone and I leaned back into the chair that I was seated in, trying to decide, could that really mean that? And we have a high wall in our bedroom, and as I leaned back and I looked up at this wall, and on that wall appeared this beautiful figure, this golden figure of a human being. And right in the center where the heart space was the only color, and it was filled with this beautiful fuchsia color. And part of my struggle had been to say, I just want to love people. Why is that not enough? Why do I have to have all kinds of fancy entertainment and clever things? And why isn't it enough to be able to just love people? I don't know how to frame that in a different kind of way so it becomes appealing to people. But what this said to me as I looked at that, and it stayed there quite a while, was that just love them, Meredith. Just love them. And don't pay attention to the outer. Just, you're on the right track. You're on the right track.
Beautiful, so inspiring,
very powerful.
So moving what happened to you.
It was.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. How can mind-body imbalances sometimes manifest as diseases?
We are just entering this wonderful world of understanding that that is in fact true, and that when we are disconnected from our body, we tend to think that our body's only job is to carry around our head, and that our head and our thinking is the all-important component here. But actually our own inner self, our own mind, body, and spirit lives in our body, not just some other place. It lives within us, and the miracle of our own body. So when we connect with our own inner self and that mind, body, spirit relationship, then we're really bringing the power to our mind-body connection. Because the mind and body operate together, but it's like saying, oh, here's a CD player. Okay, the CD player is my mind, and the body is the configuration of the CD player. If I want to change the message in that CD player, you know, the CD player is going to play whatever I put in it. So I've got to change an inner message. Or it's just blaring the same CD of you're sick, you can't, there's not enough, you won't. So changing that CD is like putting a different kind of message in your own inner self that can then play through your mind-body connection. And that's the piece. It isn't just the mind-body connection, it's what is impacting that, what is informing that really has a better, more creative message.
Okay, very interesting. What is intuitive perception, and what role does that play in healing?
It's an enormously important role, and anyone, whether they're a trained healthcare provider or a doctor or a nurse, or when they put their hands on someone, a surgeon may say, for example, well, we made this cut and we thought this was the situation, but I feel like there's something else going on here, and then they find another place, a tumor or something that needs to be mended, or a cardiologist will say, well, we're going to put a stent in your heart, and so they put it in, but it's not quite right, doesn't feel quite right. So we're always using our own intuition, but we don't recognize it as much as we should. So intuition taken to a more refined level is what I've called intuitive perception, because it's combining that sort of gut level intuitive hunch with a much more precise sense of perception. You're perceiving, I want to focus on this organ or this thought, or it's like a river, and what you're doing is you're bringing, you're damming up the river and bringing that sort of direct energy, like that laser light, to a specific understanding. And so that's what I teach a lot, is how to bring your natural intuition into a more focused state to perceive more about your life.
Okay, and that can be both on the side of the healthcare provider and for we who are patients.
Exactly. And so many times a patient will go in and the doctor will say, I think XYZ, and the patient can say, yes, but here's another factor I think is important, or I feel better about doing this than that, or and we really, as patients, we shouldn't do any treatment that we don't feel aligned with, because our body will not accept it well. So if we're sitting there with chemo and we're realizing we really need that, we may not like the chemo, but we're all for it, and we can use that as a healing tool, it can work for us. But if we're sitting there feeling like we have betrayed ourselves, like we shouldn't be doing that, we're feeling bad or guilty, then the effectiveness of that treatment is really dropped. It really doesn't have the potential effectiveness that it could have.
Yeah, tell us more about that, about the power of the mind to work together with treatment.
That's right. That is so very important. I think that many times we just go in, and if there's something wrong, there is a whole medical model that shifts into gear. This giant thing rolls forward with surgeries or treatments or chemos, and that's fine, but sometimes it can happen so fast that the person who's still in shock, for example, a woman who's been diagnosed with breast cancer or a man with prostate cancer, or things roll forward so quickly that they don't have a chance to catch up with themselves and to get themselves positioned to be to feel successful with it, that they've made a choice. And many times a person will go to a physician, and the physician will say, here's what I think needs to happen. They send them to a surgeon. I have a lot of clients that say, I need to be with this a minute. I need to go get a second opinion. I need to explore other options. I need to, and this is where the coming together of East and West that's so important now, so that the person feels they're standing in the center of all the potential treatments. Instead of feeling that they're trying to make their doctor happy by agreeing with their doctor, that doesn't work, and it doesn't work for the final outcome, which is really what the doctor wants, is to try to help that patient. But this more of a relaxed, tell me how you're feeling about this, and how does this fit with your life, and are some really important questions that doctors are learning how to ask, and not to feel threatened by the answers. Because the patient isn't pushing away from the doctor, they're just scared, and they need to be able to express that to the doctor instead of just, okay, here's 6 pills. That doesn't empower the patient to show up and to do a good job in their healing.
Mm-hmm. So what more can a patient do to, in a sense, unlock that intuitive perception that you're talking about?
It's the best of all cases is that they have a connection with their real self, their inner self, that sort of quiet inner voice before they get sick, before there's a problem, because it's really hard to play catch up when you're scared to death that you're going to die, or that you're going to get, you've got diabetes, or that's a really hard time to try to make everything right.
So you're talking about a way of life.
So it's really a way of life, and ideally to enter into a greater understanding of that mind-body-spirit connection, and to do some reading, to do some exploring, to practice some of these things, to try out some of these different modalities, to get more fluid with the fact that your body's not the enemy, that you get. One of the things that I teach is the different systems, so that our endocrine system or our circulatory system, and where the major organs are in our body. Most people have no idea where anything lives inside of them. So it's to get familiar and comfortable with their body, and the idea of energy, the energetics of one's physical body. In other words, what flows through us that supports the physical organs and systems. And if somebody is already diagnosed with a problem, or something dreadful happens, suddenly they're fired, or their partner walks in and says, I'm in love with somebody else, goodbye, or what, we have to do a fast catch-up at that point. But the best thing is to really, if we can just put our hands over our heart and say, it's all right. I may not know what's coming next. I may not know that piece, but I need to not do anything in this sort of emergency thinking mode. So when we get into that emergency thinking, I got to do it faster. I got to quick sell this house if I've lost my partner. It's that steady, steady, steady. Slow it down. Pay attention. It's all right. You don't have to be in an emergency mode for anything. We make better choices that way.
Okay, good. What is spirit-directed healing?
That's really where we're deeply listening inside, and we're listening for the best path, not just for ourselves, but also for others. So spirit-directed healing can be, how do I sit and talk with my kids or my grandkids about a separation or a death in the family? Recently my 43-year-old nephew was killed in a very strange accident where a young man was driving along, fell asleep, and he woke up when he hit the side of the road, and the car fishtailed around, and the back of the car hit him on the bike path. He was just riding his bike along, and threw him 30 feet in the air and killed him instantly.
Oh my goodness.
And so the spirit-directed healing is how to, in the middle of all these terrible emotions and the feelings of such loss and tragedy, is to be able to hold on to ourselves, and to just hold on to our heart, as it were, and not getting into the immediate, who's to blame? Who's to blame? Whose fault is it? Okay, who's going to pay? that does nothing. And so we have to take some steps back, and that takes a lot of emotional sophistication, Bret, some real spiritual soul digging to say, can I be compassionate to myself and others in this kind of a situation? You know, I think about a case where a young family was slaughtered in the Amish community near us, and the very parents, the fathers of the little girls who had been shot, came over to the family.
We're all familiar with that,
yes,
with that news story.
Extraordinary. So, I mean, it's saying that in the most amazing circumstances, we can be spirit-directed. We can be in that place of compassion. And better yet, if we're familiar with it before we hit that tragedy.
Okay, thank you so much. What is spiritual DNA? And tell us about the 7 spiritual gene sets.
I love this. I love the the idea that we really have DNA that's not physical. There's been so much research recently on our DNA and how DNA is replicated, and how then we often think that if our family my mother had breast cancer, then we're destined to get it. And young women are even going as far as getting double mastectomies and things as sort of prevention. And what I realized is there's 2 things that are important here. One is that our physical gene sets are not self-determining, and that means they don't turn on by themselves. And some of the really wonderful new research, for example, by Dr. Bruce Lipton, and he's a cell biologist. He has a book out and talking about his research that says factors like what you eat, your level of exercise, where you live if it's very polluted, but your thoughts and feelings and beliefs can turn on or turn off your DNA. So that means that we've got a little bit of a reprieve here. It says, okay, I don't have to get sick even if I have that in my family. All right, so how can I help myself really stay strong? And what I realized is that I said to myself over all these years, where can we pinpoint the capacity to love? Is it in our mind? Is it in our brain? So I thought about our reptilian brain, which is just survival. And then I thought about the cortex, which was the next evolutionary component of our brain. And that gives us the ability to emotionally sense someone else and what their needs are. And then the neocortex, which was the most recent, and that gives us the capacity to read somebody else's facial expression. So we can determine they're happy or they're sad or, but none of that accounts for the capacity to love. And so gradually what I realize is that we think about our soul, we think about God within us, and if we could take that out and we could kind of create a diagram or a picture of that, what I've realized is that there are 7 basic gene sets that really account for our ability to love in all kinds of different physical situations.
You're talking about
spiritual gene sets. That's right. And so when we can be aligned with those spiritual gene sets, our emotions tend to get settled, and our physical systems that are correlating with that tend to be healthier. For example, the gene set of wisdom that correlates to our nervous system. So if you think about that, the messages that are going through our nervous system, if they can in fact be dealing with, am I making wise choices not just for me but for others? That sort of wisdom of the collective. We come together here to make a different choice than just for me. Or one that's really important for women right now is our endocrine system, which really means our pancreas, it means our thyroid, it means adrenal glands, it means all the parts that are producing hormones and are stimulated by hormones. And so our endocrine system deals with having our own vision. So in this model that I've developed, this healing model, what it really tells us is that, for example, our family of origin, if we're still playing to what they wanted us to do for our lives, and we're trying to meet their needs, or we're trying to say, well, I should do this because there's more money in it, or we're called to have our own vision and to be able to feel it and articulate it, and that has a direct correlation to healing our endocrine system, because we're saying, my vision, my God-given, spiritual-directed vision of how I really came to help in this world, how I came to make it better. So these wonderful qualities like wisdom, vision, joy and inner peace, love and compassion, Inner power and presence, intimacy with oneself and others, intimacy and community and abundance. So it's like we spread that out and we say, if I had a soul, that if I could look at my soul in a very concrete way, these are the qualities that I have available to me that help me love. That help me love.
And by getting in touch with, in a sense, the word you use is our vision for ourselves, but also maybe a dream that we have of how we would like to express ourselves or make a contribution to our community or to the world. That's
right. And so each of the different major energy centers deals with a different way of being in relationship. And so so if we are talking about, for example, a lot of people have digestive problems. And so this whole gut area of our energy field really deals with making a living. How are we contributing what's our natural creativity? So the digestive system and the muscle system set up static that they don't work well if in fact we're being called to have a look at our belief system about our creativity and our natural skill, and the gene sets there are inner power and presence. In other words, trusting that who you are on the inside is really worthy and you can find a way of expressing it.
So that correlates with doing something that you love to do.
That's right.
As opposed to just making a living.
That's right. And also stop worrying about whether you're going to be criticized, whether the world will love you. You know, it's more important to our digestive system that we are being nourished by what we do. When you think of the physical, you take in food, you assimilate it, you let go of what doesn't serve you. The same thing is true of the work we do. You know, can we take it in? It is appealing. Can we assimilate it? In other words, the work we're doing, does it please us? Does it fill us? And can we let go of everybody else's opinions about what we should be doing?
Okay, very interesting. Thank you. What can you say about the power of being an everyday mystic?
Do you know, when I wrote about that in the book, I wanted women to stretch a little bit toward that. We're so stuck in the things that are so everyday, and that's wonderful. But sometimes we have to reach a little bit, and we have to say the idea of being a mystic, and I go on to talk about it, being an authentic human being, being a loving and authentic, compassionate human being. That's it. So being a mystic is the idea that we really have a role here to play that's about a spiritual way of living. That it's not just, oh, well, you show up, you know, you eat, you get a house, you have kids, whatever, you die. There is a greater purpose to our life, and it really is that sort of traditional mystic flavor of doing things in response to a divine knowing, to spirit within us that we're listening to. So it's paying attention inside more than just to the world around us.
Again, that requires a certain amount of courage, risk-taking, the risk of being misunderstood by the people in your life. How does a person get in touch with that quality that allows them to actually find that authentic path of a mystic?
I think it's very easy today, actually, because we can either say, look at all the things that are wrong, look at the global warming, look at the level of violence, so we run up against that, and then our response to that, we can either grow or drown. And if we grow into a place of saying, all right, I'm part of this. It can't be them and us. It's got to be all of us together. So how can I participate in this bigger picture? Or we drown in our bitterness and our fear. But if we can just say, this is a call to grow, that yes, there's challenges in our life and in our world, but we can change the view we have of that, and to say, moment by moment, I love that. Moment by moment, I enhance my life. Moment by moment, I make change.
And then obviously, I'm sure there are many kinds of pathways.
Yes.
Whether it's a spiritual discipline,
that's right,
a particular kind of scripture that nourishes somebody. Tell us about that.
Exactly. It doesn't make any difference. It's just to have whatever your path is, have it be meaningful. Don't just take it at a surface level. Find that which is more than just words. Find something that when you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're scared to death, that you've got something to reach for that's not just around you but within you.
Okay, fascinating. What else have you discovered to be essential in unleashing the power of the mind for healing illnesses and disease?
I think realizing that finding meaning in one's life is a real cornerstone. Sometimes we think that, okay, I'm just going along here and it's good enough good enough doesn't promote health. It's to say, what gives me meaning? And wearing my yellow socks can give me meaning. You know, loving my kitty cats can give me meaning, or serving, you know, food to the hungry in my town, or doing a really good job at my work. Or here again, it's to pay attention and to say, I can find meaning in anything I do. Am I finding meaning in it? Am I saying, instead of, oh, I hate this job, or I don't like what I'm doing, and we spend so much time just browbeating ourselves and other people with what's not right. It's to change that. We don't have to look at always what's wrong. We can look at what's right. We can say, okay, here's a new possibility for ourselves and others. So, and that leads to having greater meaning in our life. And that really is the number one thing that people want, is my life is meaningful. And get to the end of our life, we're not going to say, well, you know, what job I had, or how much money I had or didn't. It's going to be, did I make a contribution? Did I do something meaningful with my life, with my talents?
Mm-hmm. And how does finding that meaning in life actually relate to healing?
Because what happens is our immune system responds directly to feeling meaning and to feeling in some level of control. A lot of studies, for example, done through HeartMath Institute, really show the connection between the firings of our brain and our thoughts and our heart, and the corridor of energy, and that stress and problems in physical health, what they've been able to show in business executives, is that when people feel aligned, they feel congruent, they feel like on purpose, that there is an absolute drop in stress and missed work days, and a greater level of effectiveness in their job.
Okay, so that's very interesting to understand how that sense of purpose and meaning can actually contribute to well-being.
Exactly. Exactly. It really cuts down on our stress. And of course, stress is one of the primary factors that shows up in heart disease in men and women. And with women, 500,000 women a year drop dead of a heart attack. 500,000. Whereas breast cancer, for example, is about 37,000 a year. So, I mean, the figure is staggering that many women are holding on to a level of stress, even unrecognized stress, from loss, from depression, from sadness, that hopefully as they read Spirit Heals, they'll have a better sense of how to help themselves, slow down, be their own best friend, deal with the losses, work through them to find that level of grace.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you so much. Your book is Spirit Heals. How can people get a copy of your book?
Well, hopefully when they go into the store, I would love it if it was right there, but they may have to ask for it, but I hope they will. It's also at our own website, www.stillpoint.org.
Okay, well, Dr. Meredith Young-Sowers, it's really been a pleasure for me and a privilege to have you here as a guest on our TV show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
You've been watching The Defining Moment for Creating the Culture of Conscience. You can find us on the internet at www.definingmoment.tv. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.